Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here tonight. My name again is Abby Heilman, and I'm the Salt Watch Coordinator at the Isaac Walton League of America. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Isaac Walton League is actually one of the oldest conservation organizations in the United States. We were founded in 1922, and we just celebrated our 102nd birthday a couple days ago, so very exciting. And we do conservation programs across the United States. And we started doing a sort of our clean water program. Our flagship is the Save Our Streams program, which was launched in 1969. And so Salt Watch is one of the clean water programs that we do across the United States. And so that's what we're going to talk about here today. So in 2017, there was a pretty large road salt spill that's pictured here that was right outside of our national office headquarters in Gaithersburg, Maryland. This salt spill happened to be right on top of a storm drain that led to a waterway right below called the Muddy Branch, which leads into the Potomac River, which is a drinking water source for about 2 million Americans. And we had been monitoring the stream below the Muddy Branch for a number of things, chloride included. And throughout this presentation today, I'll use the words chloride and salt interchangeably, and I'll explain why here in a moment. But sort of faced with this big issue of this salt pile, we really weren't sure what to do. And our clean water fellow at the time was trying to figure out whose jurisdiction this salt spill actually fell into. Was it a salt spill that fell into the jurisdiction of the county, the city, the state? Was it a private contractor? We really didn't know. So after making some calls, the salt spill was finally cleaned up, but unfortunately the damage to the stream below was already done. Before the salt spill happened, the chloride level in the stream below was about 30 parts per million. After this salt spill was cleaned up, the chloride levels in the stream below were probably around 800 parts per million. They're off the charts for what we can read in our test strips. So based on that experience, we launched Salt Watch in 2018 with a number of goals in mind to raise awareness in the general public about the connection between stream health and salt or road salt, to identify some of those chloride hotspots in fresh water, and to advocate for smarter salt application of road salt by sharing some of those results that we receive throughout our program with private donors and then also local and state agencies. So what really is road salt, or some folks call it winter salt? You might notice this list here. All of those different types of salt have calcium or have chloride in them. There's 4 different types of salts that are typically used in road salt. Sodium chloride is the most common and the least expensive type of road salt that we use, or road salt component. Potassium chloride is also used, magnesium chloride, and calcium chloride. And typically magnesium chloride and calcium chloride are used at sort of lower temperatures. Sodium chloride itself only works to about 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it really doesn't work very well, or it almost stops working. And so sometimes people switch to magnesium chloride or calcium chloride, or a mixture of those to work at some lower temperatures. But this is why I'm going to be using the word salt and chloride interchangeably throughout this presentation. Also, every year in the United States, we use around 20 million tons of salt on our roadways and sidewalks. And it's really important for us to stay safe during the winter. Unfortunately, again, a lot of that salt, it ends up in our local waterways and can end up in our drinking water as a result too. So what we're advocating for here for our Salt Watch program is not to put an end to using salt, but to be smarter about our salting practices, because we certainly can do better. Another question I get pretty frequently is, how is salt applied? We're used to seeing sort of that photo on the left where we have the big truck spreading granules of salt, but sometimes we also see lines that are sprayed on the roadways. So what's really going on here? Those lines in that picture on the right, That is a brine application or a brine treatment. Brine is a salt water mixture. It's sprayed usually before a storm event, and it creates a really nice barrier between the surface of the roadway and any precipitation that's coming down. And it makes it so also any precipitation that accumulates on the roadway is easier for those applicators to scrape off. And again, it's usually applied before winter weather arrives. And so it's something called an anti-icing application. And then there is also the truck that's pictured there on the left, spreading those big granules of salt. The issue with those granules a lot of times is they tend to bounce. They're very highly concentrated because it's just that salt granule in those chunks that are being spread. So they bounce off the roadways, and again, they're very highly concentrated. And as people are walking by or as cars are traveling on roadways, sometimes those granules get kicked even further as well. And so that's more of a de-icing application. Usually the granules are applied more so when there is already some precipitation on the ground. There's not really a one solution fits all to applying road salt. Whenever you are seeing those lines that are being sprayed on the roadways, that is one way that you know that your Department of Transportation is trying to reduce the amount of road salt that they're applying, because again, it is a salt water mixture, and so it's less concentrated than those granules are of the salt or that rock salt that's being applied. So one way to know that your applicators are trying to reduce the amount of road salt pollution, and that spraying on the roadway, the brine application, it also sticks to the roadway better than that granule application does. But if, for instance, there's rain forecasted, and then maybe it'll go down to freezing temperatures, a lot of times they're going to have to use more of that rock salt application just to make sure that it doesn't wash away if there is some rain predicted in the forecast later. So there's a time to use both of those different applications, but just a little explanation of some of the background of how road salt is applied. And I do want to mention here too, a big issue that we have learned is a lot of times the Departments of Transportation, they're trying to reduce the amount of road salt that they're using. Unfortunately, in a lot of instances, the sort of for hire road salt applicators, the ones who maybe are a garden center that does landscaping throughout the spring and summer, and then does snow removal and road salt application in the winter time. Sometimes they might not have the knowledge or the know-how or sort of the formula behind what type of road salt to put down, when to apply it, how to apply it. And a lot of times they're actually contracted by the number of bags or the number of pounds of salt in a season. And so that leads to pretty gross oversalting practices. So if you see a big pile of road salt on the roadway, tell someone about it, like your EAC, for instance. There are a number of wildlife impacts. Chlorides do affect fish, but smaller organisms like those bugs in the stream, the macroinvertebrates, plankton, and microbes, they might be even more sensitive than fish at sort of lower chloride concentrations. Vernal pools can also be really intensely affected. For those of you who might not be familiar with vernal pools, there's sort of a seasonal depression or a depression that forms a seasonal water wave, usually due to snowmelt. There's typically no discharge point to the vernal pools. And so if chloride is able to get into the vernal pool, it doesn't really have anywhere to go. So it just builds up over time. And a lot of the organisms that breed in those vernal pools are things like amphibians, which are really, really sensitive organisms. So they can be pretty affected as well. And then, of course, mammals drinking from high chloride streams can be impacted. And a lot of times, things like deer, or in different areas, moose, they might even be attracted to roadways themselves and use them as salt licks. So that can put them into sort of direct impact with some vehicles that are driving by, unfortunately. And there are a number of drinking water impacts as well. Chloride is different than chlorine. It does not disinfect water. Chloride is chlorine if you're looking at it from a periodic table. However, it's an anion. It has a negative charge. So a little bit different than chlorine. If you have questions about that, I'm happy to discuss that after this presentation, or you can email me. Chlorides are also not typically removed at water treatment plants. Most water treatment plants or wastewater treatment facilities, they don't have the funding or the infrastructure to remove chloride from the waterway, or sodium in a lot of cases as well. Again, the most commonly used road salt that we have is sodium chloride. So folks who are on low sodium diets, they might not know that they're getting additional sodium from their drinking water, and that can impact public health as well. Another issue is with infrastructure. You might think about your vehicles. Last year, there was a Honda CR-V recall directly due to road salt pollution or excessive corrosion on certain parts of their vehicles. So chloride's very, very corrosive. This is a low estimate that I have on here. It was from Paul Smith's college, made this estimate that it costs the US between $16 to $19 billion annually in damages, usually to things like bridges and roadways. That's actually a low estimate. Again, we're using 20 million tons of road salt every year. And it's estimated, an organization in Minnesota called Bolton and Menck made an estimate that it actually costs somewhere between $800 to $3,300 per ton in sort of after application damages to our infrastructure. And another big issue here that's related to drinking water is what happened in Flint, Michigan, that started in 2014, the Flint water crisis. So again, chloride is incredibly corrosive. What happened in Flint, Michigan was actually related to road salt pollution. So there's a lot of things that occurred that went wrong in that instance. And what essentially happened was they switched their water source directly to the Flint River in April, and it was really high in chloride concentrations that time of year from the road salt application the winter prior. And they didn't take that into account as they were pumping that water to the citizens of Flint. And basically the chloride helped to corrode the lead and copper out of people's pipes and into their drinking water, which was really, really unfortunate. So we're trying to learn more to prevent things like that from happening across the country. And I did want to show this visual. A little bit of salt really goes a long way, which is why we're trying to be smarter about our salting practices. It really only takes 1 teaspoon of salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. If you get a 50-pound bag at the store, which is what the amount you typically buy for salt, a 50-pound bag of salt can permanently pollute 10,000 gallons of water, which is about the size of a residential swimming pool. So a little bit goes a long way. As part of our program as well, we're trying to learn about really what's happening in people's backyards. So as part of that, we actually give out free testing kits to anyone who would be interested in testing a local waterway and reporting those results to us. We send these kits out in the mail. If you can see me on the screen, we send them in a standard business envelope like what I'm holding up right now. And the kits include 4 test strips. So you get 4 tests out of 1 kit, instructions for how to take that sample, and instructions for getting those data results back to us. And it's all done online. So it's quick and easy to do. And the tests themselves only take about 3 minutes. Since the beginning of our program in 2018, we have collected over 16,000 data points nationwide. To go through some of our breakdown of what these different amounts mean, 28% of the samples that we've received have been excellent. So between 0 and 30 parts per million. That's sort of the lowest that our test strips pick up, is 30 parts per million. So anything below that we consider to be an excellent reading. Samples between 30 and 100 parts per million we consider to be good. Typically across the country, Anything over 100 parts per million is outside of what's considered natural levels of chloride within fresh waterways. And so anything above that 100 parts per million is not natural, and in a lot of cases is due to human activity. So 37% of those samples nationwide have been considered good. They're below naturally occurring levels, or within naturally occurring levels. And then anything that is above naturally occurring levels, that 100 parts per million, but less than 230 parts per million, which is what is considered to be toxic to freshwater life, is considered to be poor. And so 19% of the samples that we've received back from the beginning of the program are considered poor. And then anything that is above 230 parts per million, that is toxic to aquatic life. So 15% of those samples that we've received since the start of the program have been considered toxic. And you also might notice with this map, typically around cities, you're seeing sort of the darker colors, the red colors. A lot of times that's due to impervious surfaces. So things like concrete, pavement, anytime that water can't really seep into the ground, it's sort of concentrating some of that chloride, and then the chloride is then concentrating in those streams. And of course, it's a lot more pavement that people probably are salting as well. The dots also that you're seeing on the right there, the larger the dot, the more readings have been taken in some of those places. And then I wanted to zoom in specifically into sort of the greater Philadelphia region. So since the beginning of our program, we've received almost 900 data points from the Philly region. So 5% excellent, 40% good, 38% poor, and 17% of those samples have been toxic. And we couldn't do it without our partners. So nationwide, we have 51 official SaltWatch partners, and we have over 500 participating organizations. A lot of times I also get a question, when should people monitor? So you have 4 test strips within your kit, and you're more than welcome to request kits throughout the year, anytime, from our website, saltwatch.org. If you want to test just 4 times during the year, you can do that. If you want to test consistently throughout the year, maybe once a month, that's great too. Ideally, we'd love to see people testing consistently throughout the year, maybe once a month, but we understand that not everyone can do that. So before winter weather, to get that baseline reading, after the first winter storm, when salt has been applied to the roads, after the first thaw or rainstorm of the winter, and then after the next rain event would be sometimes. If maybe you can only sample 4 times during the year, that's when you want to go out. Of course, when it's safe to do so. And then once you've gotten your data result, you just upload it to the Clean Water Hub, which is our national water quality database. We created this database with public accessibility and usability in mind, trying to make that data really easy to access, understand, and share. We have a number of color-coded and interactive maps here on the Clean Water Hub as well. And just for those of you who really like stats and things, these are some of those stats from the Clean Water Hub. So over 16,000 stations or sample site locations, over 55,000 samples, 236 organizations, and 1,796 members. The samples that you're seeing there, we also do collect data for Nitrate Watch, which is another one of our programs studying nitrate pollution, and some different sampling through the Save Our Streams program, including macroinvertebrate sampling, looking at some of those bugs in the streams, and other chemical parameters as well. So not just SaltWatch. And we do share some of this data, so especially with our Save Our Streams program, Virginia Save Our Streams, which is within the Chesapeake Bay region, they have very rigorous data that they actually do share with the EPA annually, and a lot of the data is available to government agencies to study a little bit more about water quality as well. And then, of course, a lot of the organizations who we're partnered with or who participate with us, they use some of that data as well within their reports. and to share with their monitors to let them know what's happening around them. And since we are gaining more traction in different regions, especially like the Philadelphia region, I will be sharing lots of those results with the state levels as well throughout the year. And we're all about data to action as well. So looking at some of the data, looking at some of those results that you've received around you and turning that into an action, whether it's even talking to your neighbor, that's a really awesome big action, or maybe writing an opinion piece in the Washington Post, or one of our stream keepers, TTF, Tookoonee Frankford Watershed, they actually testified a couple years ago at the Philadelphia City Council about salt, because they were seeing levels that were as salty as seawater within the Philadelphia region. So a really major problem in that area. So little actions really add up, and then some people do some bigger actions as well. And here's just some news articles from last year about some cities that were actually trying to cut back on road salt being used for various reasons, but our salt watchers certainly had a big part to play in some of these as well. And I did want to let you know, we do have quite a few advocacy resources on our website as well, saltwatch.org, and I'll put saltwatch.org here in the chat in a moment. But starting at home, getting the word out, we have template letters to the editor, letters to reps. We have plenty of flyers and handouts that you can download and share. And then I also created an advocacy guide for road salt specifically earlier last year, that has sort of a breakdown of different applicator groups, some questions to ask those applicator groups, and how to start the conversation within your own community, whether it's with the Department of Transportation, whether it's a private applicator, a homeowner, or maybe a condo or homeowners association. What do you do to start these conversations? Because that's really how this program starts, is having a conversation and then learning to do better at your own home. And another really cool program that we did this year was Paint the Plow. And this is actually something that could certainly be replicated in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania DOT, PennDOT, they have a Paint the Plow program available to schools, but I'm sure that they'd probably open that up to organizations if you had a conversation with them. So this was something that we did within our own county, Montgomery County, Maryland, where we had 13 snowplows sent out to school groups and scout troops and partner organizations across the county, and they got to paint them with smart salt messaging. That was sort of our prompt. So we supplied all of the paint and helped them out where we could, and coordinated the dropping off and picking up of the snowplows. And so these were some of the snowplows that they painted. This one was pretty fun. Gary the snail. Snails don't like salt. So #SaveGary, avoid salt pollution. Please hold the salt. Less salt, more life. And of course, this one was our plow. And we do have more photos of these on our social media as well. And two more quick slides before I end. This is a visual that I think we need to share a little bit more. A lot of times we're used to seeing road salt amounts like the one there on the left, where there's just so much salt, you can feel that crunch underfoot. That is way too much salt. You should not be able to feel the crunch underfoot. More salt does not mean more melting. Those granules should actually be spread out. Not that I'm telling you to go out and measure, but those granules should be spread out about 3 inches apart for ideal melting, like the photo there on the right. A 12-ounce mug, or your typical coffee mug, actually holds enough salt to salt a 20-foot long driveway or about 10 sidewalk squares, which is about 2 parking spaces. So a little bit of salt really does go a long way. So what we recommend doing at your home, or maybe you are part of a homeowners association, you can spread the news here. So maybe they can work with their contractor to do a little bit better shoveling early and often helps to clear those walkways before snow turns to ice. Scattering salt, again, that 12-ounce mug holds enough salt to treat a 20-foot long driveway or 10 sidewalk squares. And then you can actually sweep up excess salt. Maybe you spilled a little bit too much, or maybe the storm has passed, everything's kind of dried up. You can sweep up that excess salt, store it in a closed container, and actually reuse it during another storm event. So some pretty easy ways to reduce the amount of road salt that we're using at home as well. So please salt responsibly to protect our drinking water, wildlife and habitats, roads, sidewalks, cars, pets, everything. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask those right now. I think we have a little bit of time. You can also visit our website, saltwatch.org. You can request a kit through our website by signing the Saltwatch Pledge and submitting some information, and I'll send you a Saltwatch kit in the mail. There's lots of resources at our website as well. I mentioned the advocacy guide, what can you do, things like that. Or please feel free to email me at saltwatch@iwla.org. So thank you so much. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those at this time.
We have one note in the chat. They said, it seems that if brining trucks sprayed a mist instead of lines, they might get better coverage and be able to use less brined.
Yeah, so actually, that's a great thought. Actually, they do need to have some space between those lines for those melting patterns. So somehow someone figured out that that's what they need to do. But yeah, we'd think that you could almost spray the entire surface, but for it to actually work properly, there does need to be salt or space between sort of that salt, similar to how the granules of salt, if you're applying rock salt, need to be spread out a little bit too. So those lines really, really do make a difference.
I have a couple quick questions. If we get a salt kit and we're thinking about which streams to sample, is there like a recommended size? Like, would it be better to sample our local headwater stream in our backyard that might be 4 or 5 feet wide? Or is it better to go downstream and find a larger stream and sample that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So you can really do any of those, any or all of the above. It really depends how much time you have, things like that. But we're more than happy to keep supplying you with salt kits until we run out, the Saltwatch kits. But yeah, we've noticed, so if you have multiple sites in mind, for instance, if you're looking at sites that are closer to roadways, typically those will have higher chloride levels than areas that maybe are sort of within a forest will have lower chloride levels in those areas. So it really depends. We've had a lot of school groups do different sort of experiments of, okay, well, how far away from the roadway do we test before those chloride levels drop off significantly? The issue that we have discovered as well, and the reason why we do recommend, if you're able to test sort of consistently on a year-round basis, is that chloride is very persistent in the environment. So once it enters the environment, it doesn't go away. And some of our partners in Philadelphia, they have really high chloride levels year-round. And a lot of that can potentially indicate groundwater contamination, which I know in some of their sites, they certainly have too.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Abby. I was in contact with you about the Steels program at Owen J. Roberts School District, and they are in North Coventry. So have you done how much have you done with schools, K through 12, as far as getting teachers and classes and kids to test water either at near the school or at their homes? Do you have anything, on your website or, as far as lesson plans, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, we don't have lesson plans on our website. I do have a school presentation that I'm more than happy to share. We're about to redo our website, so hopefully we'll have more of a teacher toolkit that'll be available within the coming year. But yeah, we do work with schools quite a bit. There's quite a few schools, especially in Virginia, that have, I think, 40 different sites that their students test at, whether maybe they're going out during the school day or maybe the students are doing testing on their own. It really depends on what the teacher is comfortable with and what they want to do as far as a project. And of course, keeping safety in mind as well. But yeah, I'm more than happy to talk to different schools or teachers or give you resources to talk to those schools as well. And we do give out kits in bulk as well. So if a teacher, for instance, wanted to send some of their students out testing, we're more than happy to give out multiple kits at once to help with that.
Abby, I have one final question. Are there any good like resources for municipalities to have, like maybe their public works department or their road salt applicators like attend a training or some kind of informational webinar or something like that, just chatting about some of these issues and giving some good tips and tricks for reducing salt usage?
Yeah, so that's something that we've been doing the last couple of years is we've actually been hosting applicator trainings as well. And so we contract through Bolton and Menk, which they're in Minnesota. But they do training sort of online for us, and then we give certifications out to any of those folks who do that training. So that would certainly be one way to go about it. Occasionally throughout the year, they do have free trainings. They divide them into different categories, whether it's for parking lots and sidewalks, whether it's for roadways, or if it's even for sort of community leaders who want to learn more to help reduce their road salt pollution within the community as well. So that would be certainly an organization that I would reach out to, and I can send you an email with their information too. But they have quite a few resources on their webpage, and I think our website does link to them somewhere. But sort of every road salt training that there is out there within the United States is actually based on their applicator training.
Abby, thank you again. I appreciate the presentation. I guess you had noted that it's easy enough to find how to participate, just saltwatch.org, right? Will get us there and we can order our test strips from there.
Mm-hmm.
And saltwatch at, what is it, isaacwaltonleague.org is the best way to contact you?
Yep. Saltwatch at iwla.org. I'll put those in the chat really quick.
Great. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Abby, thank you very much for presenting and for all that wonderful information. I'm exceptionally impressed with your participation, with the number of samples you have and the number of organizations just for starting in what you said, 2018 really has got kicked off. It's amazing for five plus years. So it's cool. Very cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.